Okay, so just three quick comments related to earlier shiurim. Number one, Rabbi Yosef has pointed out that the din about leaving Sfarim open, there are mekilim to leave the room for a short amount of time with the Sofer open. Number one. Number two, the question came up a couple of days ago about a Sefer Torah having kasher shamita in a room that has a Sefer Torah, and we mentioned that if you have a mechitza that's 10 tefachim high, so then that is chaitzitz, and we were wondering, what if the Sefer Torah protrudes above the mechitza? Is that a problem? So I found that the Bir Alocha in Siman Reish Mem, I think it's Sivav, asks Claire's exactly this question. And he says that although it seems from the Mechaber that Tasha Shamita would be mutter as long as there's a mechitza there, even if the Sefer Torah is visible above the mechitza, nonetheless, he says one should cover the Sefer Torah, one should be machmir. He says if it's other svarim, one can be mekel. And the third point,
that was one covering, perhaps.
One covering is enough, yes. In other words, be'etzim the mechitza is enough, but l'chatchila one should add one cover. That's what the Bir Alocha says. And finally, I think it was yesterday that we were talking about the old that the Sfardim made up their own ksav to avoid a problem of writing ksav ashuris. So this is pashtus the ksav that the Be'er Agayla Rabbeinu Yerucham was referencing. Okay, this is what it is. If you look into any Ritva Rashba, any Sefer from Erishan, you'll see that they have all the Kisvayad, and the Kisvayad from Sfard are always in this type of handwriting, and the Pashtus is that's what he's talking about.
Does that mean they hold like the Rambam?
Does that mean they hold like the Rambam? Yeah, quite likely. Yeah, it's possible that is what it means. L'chayra, they were makbid not to use block letters, even in those, you see they're makbid even like Rav Shlomo Eiger, as they didn't want to use even block letters. They just made up a totally different ksav to avoid the problem. Okay. Siman Reish Pei Vav. Mekaymes hachayavim b'mezuzah. Elu ha-mekaymes hachayavim b'mezuzah. The following places are chayav in mezuzah. Echad sharei batim, v'sharei chatzeris, u'medinas ba'ayoris. All of everything that follows, which are sharei batim, meaning the gate to a home, the gate to a property, v'sharei chatzeris, the gate, well, actually, the Shari Chatzeris is the gate to a chotzer. In other words, you have multiple homes in a chotzer, right? So the gate to the chotzer is chayiv. Shari Medinas, I added in the word Shari, right? You have the gates to a country, right? You enter a country through a gate. The Ayoros, the city, right? You enter a city through a gate. Refes Bakar, a barn, is chayiv in mezuzah. Now that might be surprising. A barn is chayiv in mezuzah. You would think it's a yucky place. Says the Shach in Sivkot and Beis. The afal gav dehu b'makom hatinayfis. Even though it's a yucky place, mikol makom leinafish zuamayo. It's not that yucky. So a barn, he says, would be chayiv. A lul is a chicken coop. But oitzris yain, the shemen, is a storehouse. Okay, so a machsan is chayiv in mezuzah, according to the Mechaber. It's interesting that the Rambam says that a machsan, a storehouse, is potter from mezuzah, and this is one of those instances where the Mechaber doesn't even mention the shita of the Rambam, completely ignores the shita of the Rambam, and paskins flat that a machsan is chayiv in mezuzah. Perhaps you're confusing it with a different thing, where we're going to see later that there's a question about a walk-in closet, if that's chayav in mezuzah or not. So I think the Minchas Yitzchak says that if you don't enter the closet, then there's no chiyuv according to anybody. But a storehouse, I mean, there's no such thing as not being able to enter the store. You have to go into the storehouse to take the things out.
The signs here are so small that you almost can't get into them, so they're really not, there's not available space.
So that's exactly the Minchas Yitzchak that I'm talking about. That's a different discussion. We'll get to that. But a regular storehouse, a regular machsan, that you walk in, you take things out. A warehouse, thank you. Yes, better word, a warehouse. Because obviously you can enter into a warehouse. But a machsan is the same thing. It's just a smaller version of a warehouse that one enters into. But we're going to come back to you when we get up to, I think it's Sif Yud Gimel. We'll talk about that. This is already a much longer discussion, but since you're bringing it up, I'll try and say it in 30 seconds. What Reuvain is asking is, I'm reformulating your question. When we say that a machsan is chayiv in mezuzah, does the machsan have to be an addendum to the home, like a garage, right? A person owns a home and the home has a garage, or a person in Eretz Yisrael lives in a dira and in the building there's a machsan. But let's say I inherited all my great-grandmother's furniture and I don't have where to put it. So I rent storage, right? You drive in the highways, you always see signs, storage rentals, right? So I rent storage 6 miles from my home. So is that what he's talking about? Or is he talking about, so there are many contemporary poskim that say that a machsan is only chayev in mezuzah when it services the home. So I keep my extra bottles of Coke in my machsan, and every time I need a bottle, I go and I take a bottle of Coke. That's chayev. I have an extra fan. I keep it in the machsan. When the summer comes and it's hot, I go and I take my fan. I'm chayev in mezuzah because the machsan, we view the machsan as an extension of the home. But if I keep goods in a warehouse that's nothing to do with my home, that would be potter. There are poskim that say that, and others say that no, that the mechaber is talking about any machsan. I'll just throw in another 15 seconds. Another machlekes is whether the machsan is chayev only if you use it regularly, or is the machsan even chayev if you, let's say, only keep your Pesach kalim in there. So you go in there once a year. So is that chayev or no? You have to go in there once every month or two to be chayev. So that's also, these are all machlekes. Ubeis ha'isha. What about the home of a woman? Meaning you have a single woman who lives in a home. So would she be chayev in mezuzah? Says the mechaber, she would be chayev in mezuzah. What would be the tzad nat? Says the shach, v'loy amrinan beisecha v'loy beisa. We don't make a drasha that it's his home, not her home. Elakevan desiv l'man yirbu yemechem. Since the idea of having a mezuzah, or one of the segulas of having a mezuzah, is a long life, v'nashi nami b'ichay. We want women to live as well. We're equal opportunity kind of religion, and we're pro-life for women as well. So they would also be chayiv in mezuzah. Ubeis hashutfim. Let's say you have partners. You have two roommates that rent you have this in the Mir Yeshiva, right? You have five Bachrim rent a apartment together, so it's a beis hashutfim, or they buy a home together. Kulam chayavim. The chiyuv is on all of them. Hagos, says the Ramah, v'dafka kishabeis hashutfim Yisraelim. That's when all the people in the apartment are Jewish. Aval bayishal Yisrael v'goy. But let's say you're attending Harvard University and you rent an off-campus apartment, and you have a guy who's your shutif. So that says the Ramah, Aval bayishal Yisrael v'goy, pater mi mezuzah. When you're shutfim with a guy, that would be a ptur. Okay, the chain, I'm just going to point out that example that I gave of the two students is lav dafka, right? The Ramah is just saying that when you have shutfim of Yisrael and a guy, is part of mezuzah. A standard case would be an apartment building, right? If you have an apartment building, you live in Manhattan, and you have an apartment building that has whatever percentage Jews and whatever percentage non-Jews, so that's shutfim. So that would be potter, right? Which it really is the next line. V'chein chatzeres. Correct, the entranceway. That's saying. It's really the next line that's talking about. V'chein chatzeres ayayaris shemiktzas goyim, right? So the main entrance to that apartment building would be where you have some residents who are Jewish and some who are non-Jewish. So that would be Dharam Sham Turim Mimezuzah. As long as there are both Jews and non-Jews that live there, so then it would be potter from mezuzah. So I have a correspondence with your Israel Orbach about the Sha'arim of the Ir Atikah. Whether I have a letter I could show you, I wrote to him and he wrote back to me discussing the Ir Atikah. And the tzadim over there, it's sad to say that it's potter is that it's partially Jewish, partially non-Jewish. It's sad to say that it's chayev is because it's under Jewish rule. So in other words, perhaps in a situation where Jews, in other words, regardless of whether they're religious or not, but they're Jewish, right? So when you have Jews that are in charge, and maybe we view the non-Jewish residents as their subjects, so to speak. So then maybe there would be a mocker. So that's a discussion. Now, let's just see the Taz in Sivkot and Beishal Yisrael of a guy potter. When you have shutfim of a Jew and a guy that it's potter, the shutfim are being in the siv here be meichem u'avid kachavim ein. And I was happy for women to have long lives, but not necessarily other religions are we so excited about that idea. Says the Shach also in Sivkot and Zion. Could I see a little bit? Afilu rubam Yisraelim k'turim mishum sakana. Right? In other words, let's say you have a chutzner which has 5 homes in the chutzner, right? And 3 of the people who live in the chutzner are Jewish and 2 are not Jewish. It's still potter. In other words, we're not going to say you go basar roiv. Why? Because there's a sakana involved. In other words, we're scared that this will rates on the goyim and there could be a pogrom. Right? You had the Jewish areas in Krakow and in Prague, right, where they were kaveh sha'arim b'recheves haYehudim and nisgarim b'alaylos, like a ghetto. For loy kavu b'hem mezuzahs ma'aylam, they never put up mezuzahs there. B'hainu taima mishum sakana, right? Because if they would see mezuzahs there, the goyim would get all upset and they would say that there's kishuf going on over here and the Jews are practicing witchcraft and they're going to kill us and they're poisoning the wells and who knows what could happen. So
we're not saying that.
Well, hating Jews, well,
it's clearly Jewish. They hate them.
Yeah, okay.
I'm saying, even when they don't have to come on to, they're doing kishuf.
Oh, okay, fine. Yeah. Now also, that's okay. Point acknowledged. Yes. Halacha beis hateven ubeis ha'etzim ubeis habakar chayavim. Right. So again, a warehouse, right, is chayav in mezuzah. Now, what's the difference between eitzis? Yeah, so there are some that want to say, again, it's too lengthy to get into, but there are some that, what's the difference between eitzis yain v'shemen of the previous halacha and beis hateven or beis ha'etzim? So some want to say one services the house, one doesn't service the house. There's different pshatim over here. Ubeis habakar is also a corral, chayavim. These areas are chayav in mezuzah. Now, just a corral is an open area, really. It's a bad example. So you need fences, and generally speaking, you need a ceiling as well. So, and you certainly need a doorway. So if you have a corral with like a waist-high gate, and there's no mashkef, there's no lintel on top, so that would be potter. But provided that it meets the conditions that are required, so then a beis habakar would be chayavim. Ve'im hanoshim, and just by the way, this also is part of the previous machlokes. In other words, is it only talking about a refes bakar and a beis habakar that are attached to the home? No, it's like in Moshav Yishi. You have a home, and then behind the home, you have the horses there, right? So are we mechayev it because we view it as an extension of the home, or are these areas chayev even if the guy doesn't live near there at all? These are all questions that the place can grapple with. Ubeis habakar chayavim. All these areas are chayev. Ve'im hanashim rechtzais behan. Now in those days they didn't have indoor plumbing, they didn't have bathrooms, they didn't have showers in the house. So where would the women shower? They would shower or bathe in the barn, right? So kevan sha'im deshamaruma. So since that area is not a bakavadika place, ein kavod shamayim liyasham mezuzah, so that would be a patur. In other words, if the area where one keeps his animals is also the area. Notice this halacha is not really negay nowadays, but in those days, if people would bathe in those places, so what would have otherwise been chayev and mezuzah becomes pater. Hagos, as the Ramah v'dafka elu. That's only talking about these secondary type of places, right? In other words, a barn is not really your house. We're only being mechayev it maybe because it's an extension of your house. But if the women bathe there, so then it's going to be pater. Aval cheder mamish. But if let's say the woman bathes in the living room, right? So then afilu makom sheish v'isha yeshenim, even if it's a master bedroom, umeshamshim sham chayev b'mezuzah. In other words, if it's a regular living space, the fact that on occasion a person does a tash mishel bizayin in a regular business living place is not a patur. This patur that it paters the room completely is only when it's not a regular living quarter anyway. There are some that say that any master bedroom would be pater mi mezuzah because the tashmish bizayin in that area paters the room entirely. We don't pass in that way, obviously. Veneerly, and very often this also comes into play. This next line in the Ramah, veneerly, the b'makim shehadelas mi bifnim, ukeshasheichim sham seigrim hadelas v'nimtza mezuzah mi b'chutz chayav l'kuli almas. I think it's this way in the overwhelming majority of bedrooms, bismanenu, is that the door opens into the bedroom, right? So the mezuzah is on the doorpost. So when the door is closed, the mezuzah is actually outside of the room. So he's saying, in that case, even according to the Shittas who pater a master bedroom, or lavdafka, a master bedroom, right? A guest bedroom where somebody has guests, married guests who sleep there as well. So all these areas would be pater, according to this opinion in the Ramah. Nonetheless, since when the door is closed, the mezuzah is outside, so chayev l'kulei alma, and as we said, we pass in like the other opinion anyway, that it's chayev. So, bathroom. So that we'll have to give a separate share on a bathroom. There's a Chazon Ish that talks about why is a bathroom pater. But we're going to come to it. We might get to it yet today. The answer is because the bathroom is made for a tashmish bizayin, a room that's made for a tashmish bizayin and used that way. So that's pater. There's no tzad to be mechayev that at all. Chazon Ish is talking about. I thought you were asking about a different reason why a bathroom is pater. Okay, but we'll get to that.
Is this a source for what was a very, very widespread phenomenon of people that in there only putting mezuzah on the front?
There's a Chuvas Maril who wonders why the minig is only to put a mezuzah on the front door, and he tries with all types of lumdisha calisthenics to figure out why people might think that other rooms are pater, but the bottom line is he says it's just amiratzis, and every room needs a mezuzah. And here also the Nezde Kalim discussed, but it's all reasons, but all the reasons are not sufficient. Gimel, Beis HaKnesses. What about, now this is very, very important. We're going to see, I think later, I think it's in Sif Yud, we're going to talk about a Beis Medrash. So it's very important at this stage to define our terms. A Beis HaKnesses is a synagogue, right? So like when I was growing up in the Young Israels, nobody learned in the synagogue, right? Now there was a Beis Medrash, right? It was the Young Israel across the street from my house. I think most Young Israels are like this till today, is that there's a shul where you daven, that's called the Beis HaKnesses, and then there's another room in the back called the Beis Medrash, right? Or the shtibel, where there are shiurim and where people sit and learn. So in those days, they had, today it's much less common, in like most shuls nowadays are a shul and a Beis Medrash, right? But over in those times, you had a shul, a Beis HaKnesses, where you prayed, and a Beis HaMedrash, where you learned. So now we're talking about a Beis HaKnesses where one prays. And so a Beis HaKnesses, the default is that it's pater, because it's not a Makom Dira. But he says, a Beis HaKnesses, and Yesh by Dira, L'Shum Adam, if someone lives in the synagogue, so then it's chayiv and mezuzah, meaning if no one lives in the synagogue, so it's pater from mezuzah. What if nobody lives in the synagogue, but somebody lives in the hall, when you enter the shul, and somewhere in the shul building, there's a dira for the shamus, right? So then, so then the area where the shamus lives, or whoever it may be, is chayev, or Beis HaKnesses pater. So that's straightforward. Now we come back.
The Machaber is coming over where the shul is like an entrance way to get to the dira.
No. That's not what he's talking about. This dira is before. It's in a separate area. The question you're asking is going to be a different halacha that we're going to get to later. But this is talking stam, where in the building of the shul, there is a dira that the shamus has, and there is a hall where people daven. So the hall is pater, and the place where the guy lives is going to be chayiv. That's all he's saying. If the guy lives in the shul.
In the shul,
he sleeps on the bench.
On the shul, if it's used as a dira, that is a separate dira. Like
Correct. It means the guy sleeps on the bench. Yes. Now we come back to what you were asking about it before. Beis HaKisei, a bathroom with Beis HaMerchatz, there are people till today in Eretz Yisrael that have a room with just a bathtub, right? So that could be Beis HaMerechatz, or Beis HaBursaki is a leather tannery, or Beis HaTvila, a mikveh, Pturim. All these places are potter, Lefisha Einam Asuyim Lediras Kavod. This is what we were talking about before, because they are not made for a diras kavod. Says the Shach in Yud Aleph, Pirush, Afim Mechasa HaMezuzah. Even covering the mezuzah is not going to be an eitzah. The layia mishum bizayin, you want to have bizayin mishum kisvei hakodesh mikol makim. Kevan de einam asuyim lediras covered pturim mezuzah ve'ein lasis sham mezuzah. There's no chumrah or hiddur to say I'm going to put a mezuzah on my bathroom and I'll just cover it really well. No, the makim is potter because it was made for a Tashmish Bizayin, or rather, to use his language, Lefisha Einam Asuyim Lediras Kavod. It's not a residence. Hey, the market.
It's
saying it's also to put one up. Yeah. Hey, the Makam Sheyesh Tinuf. What about a place? Now, this is in contrast to the previous 5 words, right? The previous 5 words were Lefisha Einam Asuyim Lediras Kavod. It's not made for a diras kavod. But what about a place that ostensibly might be made for a diras kavod, but there is tinuf there, right? What's tinuf? Tinuf is shmutz. For instance, kagain shatinaikis mitzuyim sham. You have children that are there. So then, toiv lachases hamezuzah. Now, in a bathroom, covering the mezuzah is not an option because it's also to put a mezuzah there. But if you have a area in the home where there's shmutz, so then you need a mezuzah, but the mezuzah should be covered. Ubamakim tara, but if there's no shmutz there, toiv liyas niras. On the contrary, it should be seen. Right? We're going to see later on in one of the later simanim in Hilchos Mezuzah, there's an inyan which we all know that the shakai of the mezuzah should be seen. We want to see the mezuzah, but we only want to see the mezuzah if it's a home not full of little children running around without their towels on after the bath. Says the Shaf in Sivkot and Yud Beis, but Makim Sheyesh Tinuf, Pirush who also Lediras covered. Now it's a regular home, but sometimes there's schmutz there. So Hilka Chayev Medina, it's Chayev, then you would cover it. And the Taz in Dalid adds, if you go down like 2 or 3 lines in the Taz, you'll see that he says, from the fact that it says that it's good to cover it, it's not obligatory to see the mezuzah. Mizela Madati says the Taz, I understand from this, she'oisen ha'anoshim she'ein oisen mezuzah, machma she'oimrim she'goinvin misham, v'noyagim behem bisayim. Some people, they don't put up a mezuzah because they say the goyim ripped the mezuzahs off the wall, right? So says the Taz, sorry, that's not a p'tur. She'ein zeh matzil aleim, that doesn't help them. She'chayon litein ha'mezuzah sham ba'oifen she'lo tiyeh megula klal. You could hide the mezuzah in the post to the point that it's not going to be visible at all. Mibachutz. Ela afilu neged Hashem shel shakai. The zeh al kol panim toiv yosem milevat v'la mitzvah legamri. Right. So you find in Me'asharim, right? If you walk around, you'll see in the stone they have mezuzahs in the stone. Right. So I would imagine they chisel out the stone and then they cement the mezuzah into the stone. So I never asked anyone, but I think it's for 2 reasons. I think number 1 is because of the weather, right, to protect it from the elements. But number 2 is especially when Me'asharim was built, right, you could potentially have marauding Arabs coming through doing who knows what. So to protect the mezuzahs, they put the mezuzah. So that's this Taz. The Taz says being scared of Goyim is not an eitzah because you can hide the mezuzah in the post itself. And there's a Piskei Tshuva that's kedai to see over here also. In Sivkot and Zayin, I am the Sefer Yad Aktana, Paragimel Mehilch Mezuzah, so I see Gimel, Shekaza Bekolza, Mari Dafka, Kashi is down Lafam B'Mikra, Aval Esa Davar Matunov. This that was saying that you have to put up a mezuzah, just cover it when there's schmutz in the house, is only when the schmutz is there temporarily. And you have to change the baby, right? And the only place you can do it now is neged ha-mezuzah. The hainu sheyev shebin yinacher. Az dinay lechasis. That's when you cover your mezuzahs. Aval chalila lases bekfiyah shum dover bizayin neged ha-mezuzah. But a person shouldn't set up his baby changing station right in front of the mezuzah, v'lismech ala kisei. Others say you shouldn't. There are people that leave their garbage by their front door, right? They take, instead of taking the garbage out to the big trash in the street, right? They'll leave 2 or 3 things of garbage at their front door. So that's what some would say is a davar bizayin b'kviyas neged ha-mezuzah. And v'lismech ala kisei says you can't rely on the fact that the mezuzah is covered. He's saying even if you have a case, you can't do a tashmish bizayin b'kviyus in front of a mezuzah. That's. I just wanted to get that in there.
I've chiseled a space in my door, wooden doorpost, for a door that swings open and closed. Let's say I've chiseled space, like you mentioned in the stone from Mezuzah. I've done a wooden doorpost.
Yeah.
So the door, when it swings open and closed both ways,
okay.
there's no way to put it there.
Say that.